All right, so in takes that aged like milk, I want to say 2 podcasts ago is when we had our first Team USA basketball discussion. Now that the Olympics are officially underway in Tokyo, and this is when scrimmages were going on, and the U.S. had dropped two, and we, kind of had Justin and I had the discussion of what's going to happen. Should we actually be worried about this? And we're like, whatever, it's scrimmages. They ended up, finishing their last one pretty strong, and then the second one against Australia got canceled because of COVID. Well, now here we are in the real games, and the U.S. comes out in their first Olympic game of group play and loses to France 83-76. Our old pal from here in Orlando, Evan Fournier, just torching the U.S. for 28 points. Not knocking the U.S. out of gold medal contention, but certainly a concerning start. Kevin Durant had 10 points. Dame Lillard had 11. A pretty bad day, honestly, for anyone who wasn't named Drew Holiday. And so, Lewis, I mean, here we are. They're 0-1. Their next game is against Iran. If they can't beat Iran, they're really, really in trouble. But this is the first loss for the U.S. since 2004. Certainly, this is a long cry off from the Redeem team in 08. I think everyone knows that, just given the roster. But, I mean, on a 1-10, what's your concern level right now?
I would say my concern level is squarely at a 7. The reason I see it that way is, for one, I have my issues with the team coming in. There were some notable, omissions from the team, as far as a lot of people are stressing that we're not fielding our best team, right? You got injuries to thank to that, as well as just people wanting extra rest, whether it be LeBron James or Stephen Curry or the likes and things like that. But I just feel like the makeup of this team was never really a good fit. Like, for one, they're missing what they're lacking. They're lacking glue guys. When you look, who are the intangible guys? Who are going to be the people who are going to set the hard screens, going to be okay with not getting their shots and running the offense? You don't see a lot of those, as well as size in the front court. They don't have any big men besides Bam to really hang your hat on, or a rim protector that's going to be able to clean up the messes from the guys in the front. And that just goes back to defense. Like, this team doesn't have the defenders on the perimeter level, or bringing in Drew Holiday is great. But aside from him, when you took away Drew Holiday and what Chris Middleton were able to bring when they jetted in there in the heat of the night, it was going to be a really, really tough matchup for, guys like Damian Lillard and Zach LaVine to be able to hold their own out there. A lot of people make allusions to the 2016 team because we didn't have all of our stars there as well. But when you look at the makeup of that team, you had guys like Klay Thompson, Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, Paul George. Those guys were able to shore up some of the defensive ends, because what I see the biggest lack with this team here in 2021 is there's no easy buckets. They're getting everything from pure isolation, and they're missing their shots. And if you can't create easy buckets through turnovers and things like that, when we look at the 2008 teams, the 2012 teams, we think of Dwayne Wade and Kobe Bryant and LeBron James getting into the passing lanes and giving them some easy buckets. So that's my easy read on the team as far as like what they're lacking. But real quick, Kev, let me talk about this. I saw an article from Kevin Pelton, ESPN, and he made some interesting parallels to the 2014, as far as, one, they both finished terribly in the World Championships before the Olympics, right? Mm-hmm. In 2002, they came in 6th place. In 2019, they came in 7th place. And then as well as 8 new players to the international stage, both the same for 04 and 2021. And they both had exhibition losses. Those matches, like you just talked about previously, the losses they had in Nigeria and the ones to Australia. I'm not going to say that it's going to end up in a bronze medal, but I'm just saying that we're dangerously teetering towards a place we've been before.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you hit a lot of good points. I want to go back to really all of them, and I'll go back to the kind of the roster construction and, I mean, necessarily how they match up with some of these other countries in a second. But I mean, I think the first thing you said that's important is, you're right. The one clip that went viral was late in the game when Zach LaVine missed a jumper, Kevin Durant missed a jumper. And I think really they're the play where they didn't drive, where they settled for the open 3-pointer. Now, here's the thing. That's a wide open look. I'm not necessarily going to be upset about that. I get that. It seems pretty wild when a French defender is completely down on the floor to not drive it at that point, especially down 2. But when it's a wide open corner 3, you're one of the best shooters in the game. Like, it's hard for me to really argue with that shot. But I mean, to your point, it is. They don't. It doesn't feel like they have a true point guard, except when Drew Holiday is on the floor, and it does feel like they have a lot of guys who just are playing ISO right now. Kevin Durant, Dame Lillard, down the line, Zach LaVine, especially, are playing ISO. And the other big thing, like you said, is that perimeter defense. I mean, Zach LaVine and Dame just got torched. There's no way around it. Like, they got absolutely torched on the perimeter. And I know you have Dre and you've got Bam in the starting lineup, but there's just only so much you can clean up. Like, they're giving up a lot of points. They're not nearly as stout defensively, like you said, mentioning guys like Paul George and Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry, who are much better than that. And I mean, I just think it goes back to the fact too that, with this amount of talent on the team, I still think you're a little shell shocked that it's like, look, this is a great collection of talent. There's no reason that they should be losing to rosters that, I mean, France, for example, is one of the better teams in the tournament. Evan Fournier, Rudy Gobert, obviously, are real solid NBA players. Yabusele's on that team. He's an NBA player. Nick Batum is there. But look at all the amount of all-stars on the USA team. Like, they just don't match up. But to that token, these other teams, A, have an identity and play with an identity way more than this version of the U.S. team is. And B, like, they are living for this moment. Like, I think the U.S., and maybe this kind of comes around where I'm back with 04 as well. Like, when the U.S. wins all these gold medals, it's just kind of assumed that you're going to win gold medals. So maybe it doesn't mean as much to you where, I mean, imagine look at how much love that Argentina team from 04 that ended up winning that gold medal still gets to this day with Ginobili. I mean, people tout that as one of Manu Ginobili's greatest achievements, even some more than his championships with the Spurs sometimes. Like, they know what it can mean for these teams. Like a guy like Luka, who goes out and drops 48 for Slovenia. Like, he mentions before the Olympics even start that winning a gold would mean everything. Fournier in post game mentioning that, they're just not scared of this Team USA right now. Guys know that the talent level is shrinking. I mean, we talk all the time about how the NBA has become so much more of an international game. The finals MVP, who we'll get into in a little bit, is from Greece. Like, it's not just the US. The USA isn't the only place churning out basketball talent anymore. But nevertheless, it's still a little jarring when you have all the all-stars and this amount of talent on the roster. There's no planet where the USA should be losing, in my opinion. But I get it when they're maybe not as motivated. And like you said, their best lineup isn't there. LeBron has done multiple Olympics. He just is sitting this one out. He's older at this point. He wants the rest. Kawhi Leonard is hurt right now. Steph Curry's not playing. James Harden's not playing. Is he still dealing with injury? Like, this isn't necessarily not just the best construction, but we're not even taking all the best or the best USA players right now too. So if you're at that point, it does feel like it's a little more vulnerable. And I mean, like I said, I think they're going to crush Iran. I think there's something like 30-point favorites. And if they struggle with Iran, I think at that point we're looking at like stick the nail in the coffin in this current team. There's still hope for them to get the gold, but it's not going to be a cakewalk. There's no doubt about it. Like, they could very well struggle, and they are not the shoo-in favorites that I think we all assumed they were.
Oh yeah, like for me though, it's like, all right, a couple. For one, I just want to touch on this point first. The mystique of Team USA, it's gone, right?
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
For one, I would say the star power on this team has a little bit to do with that. Zach LaVine is great, but I don't think on the worldwide stage he carries the same weight as, say, like Carmelo Anthony. You know what I mean? And that standpoint. So when you look at the bench, I was talking about this on Twitter, just talking about how the mystique is gone, and people are saying just look at the bench players. Like, when you're looking at players like, 7 and 8 through, like, I don't know how many players, 15 players they have on the team. Like, that's when you start to look at this roster and other rosters and go, they don't kind of line up to par. But I'll give them this credit. For one, we know that continuity is a problem. Obviously, the Team USA shuffles more than probably any of the national teams because they keep their guys for a longer period of time, right? So I totally understand that. But I would say effort seems to be lacking. And I don't know what's going on. It's been a lot of things that's been happening. It's been a crazy last couple of years. But as far as like the pride, they're not necessarily playing with, like, they want to be there. I know that, some guys make outstanding commitments as far as like the guys who participated in the finals. But it's just like when I'm looking at the last play where, when Kevin Durant's kind of giving some half-hearted efforts to get the rebound and close out to Evan Fournier for the shot that ended up winning the game, it just makes you think that they're not taking this as seriously as they once did. But as far as like the talent gap, I still think we have it. Like, that's why I said 7, because I think that over, talent should win out over the course of these Olympics. I still think they're the favorites to win the gold. But when you look at, all right, now we didn't put our best guys in. It looks like it's a little bit more comparable. When you look at 2024 and then like how so many of these older guard superstars are going to be kind of on their way out or out. And then you look at possibly a 2028, like the world is catching up. Like when you look at the world superstars, you know how they do the Rising Stars game with USA versus World? They theoretically can possibly do that for the next actual All-Star game if you really want to do it. You think about some of the international stars, whether it be Embiid, Giannis, Luka, Jokic. Like these are all NBA guys like that are from other places, and that's proof of Adam Silver and the way he's growing the game and his efforts to grow the game, because obviously I feel like that's a great that's going to be one of his crowning achievements as far as making the NBA and basketball more of an international game as far as here in the States. But I think that this will be the last Olympics that the USA can just trot out whoever and even think that they have a chance, because right now we still don't know if they have a chance. But I think the USA team arrogance is going to die, and they're going to have to revamp the program a bit.
Yeah, and it's still surprising with the effort, because when you get a commitment from a guy like Kevin Durant, somebody that I think you and I agree is probably the best player in the world at this point. Worse, he's number 2 probably. You would think maybe because there are guys that have been here before, but like you said, it doesn't feel like the effort is there. It's interesting because you have me thinking now, and I didn't really intend to go down this hole, but I think about the top 10 players, and you just mentioned a couple of them there. There's a very real possibility that 4 of, which is maybe the most ever, but I would say 4 of the top 10 players are international right now. Between you, like I don't know the exact ranking, but between Giannis, between Jokic, between Luka, depending if you think he's a top 10, and wherever you put Embiid, I think that might be the first time in history that's ever happened. I mean, we've had international guys obviously been a big part of the league now for, I would say, 30 years at this point. But I mean, it's definitely, like you said, if you put a Team World against a Team USA, it's even. Like it's no longer, and even this Team USA's bench, it's just not quite as scary as it used to be. Like you said, alluding to that depth, Jeremy Grant is a great NBA player. Keldon Johnson put in a lot of great minutes for the Spurs this year. JaVale McGee is a multiple-time champion. When you look at that 08 roster, and it's completely bulletproof, and there's no holes there, it's a little bit different with these guys. They don't exactly strike fear. So like you said, I think that's just another reason where that team mystique is gone. It's not like they're playing big minutes, but you do have to be a little more top heavy than you have been in the past. For sure.
Real quick though, Pop. How do we feel about Pop? I know that there are rumblings out that the Spurs system. Do you think it's Pop? Because he also in the Pelton article, Pop was on that 04 team. He's on that 04 bench, and he also obviously coached the 2019 FIBA World Cup, which they came in like 7th place, and it was a disaster. So do you think it's his international track record when it comes to coaching? Can he just not coach stars?
I think we need to start to look at it. I'm not quite there yet, and obviously, I'm not ready to just dump on one of the best NBA coaches of all time, somebody who's probably on the Mount Rushmore, but I think you might need to start to evaluate it a little bit. Like, Pop is an all-time legend. It just may be time for fresh faces as well, like potentially if it doesn't go well. Now, again, they could win the gold medal, and this could all be a joke in a week or two, but there's plenty of talented coaches as well. I know, for example, on Heat Twitter, they were really pumping Spo hard to go coach, which would be a great choice if he ended up being the replacement eventually. Jay Wright's there on the bench as well. Obviously, a lot of never success at the pro level, hasn't made that transition, but a ton of success at Villanova. So they have options. It's going to be an attractive job, but it'll be interesting to me as well if they don't win this year. We saw in 04 when they lost, just total embarrassment that it was. They came back in 08 with that just monstrosity of a team, like a team that arguably is as good as the 92 team, the dream team that everybody talks about. I'd be interested. I would love to see if that has that effect, and you maybe get guys who are more interested in playing for Team USA, bringing that mantle back to the top of the Olympics and reminding everybody like, hey, this is still our game. We know y'all are catching up, but it still runs through the United States. We're going to see, I guess, here over these next few weeks. Welcome, everybody, to the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Justin Kuzart is on vacation. It was my turn a couple weeks ago for vacation. Justin has taken some much-deserved time off. So joining me, my friend Louis Axen. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, @LouisArtisan. Hosts the LA Minute podcast. Has been here on Drive and Dish before, so you should be familiar with him at this point. What's up, Lou? How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. It's been a nice summer, I'd say. You know, I'm gonna be using this downtime to spend time with the family for a couple weeks until NFL training camps really get underway. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, what are we? So let's just get it out of the way quick. You're a big Dolphins fan. Training camp is underway. What realistically, I guess you're expecting this season? Obviously, an expanded playoff field here starting last year. You think they get in this year? Are we expecting big things out of Tua?
oh, I'm expecting very big things out of Tua. He's fully healthy. Last season he had less than a year coming off that hip injury. So this year he's got a full mobility and he's going to be able to throw a lot better and harder and further, just using a full body instead of just arm as I thought it was. He got more weapons. The defense was largely brought back intact, and the schedule is very easy. So if you're a betting guy, I say bet the over on the Dolphins wins. I think they win at least 10 games. I got them in for 11 games. You also got to think about there's an extra week now. So there's an extra game. We'll see a lot of 11-6s and no more 8-8. So
Yeah, no, I think they should be pretty good. And like you said, that division is down large. I mean, Buffalo is going to be good again, but the Jets seem to be terrible every single year. Patriots went nowhere fast last year. We'll see what exactly happens there. But, it all just depends on Tua. We're going to see what happens. Waddle obviously going out and getting him help in the first round. So hopefully that'll take some pressure off his shoulders as well. A little bit of Alabama connection there as well. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We will read them here on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Stitcher, Google Play Store, Spotify, Amazon Music, Spreaker, TuneIn, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. And now a word from our sponsors. All right, so the Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions. It's been about a week now since that happened. Game 6, Bucks in 6 did happen. They clinched on home court. I am happy to say that Justin and I, a little bit bragging kind of call. We basically said it came down to Game 5, and I felt like if the Suns didn't, because the last time we recorded was after Game 4, it was 2-2. Obviously, the Phoenix Suns win in the first 2 games. The Bucks win in their next 2 games at home, tying it up. And I felt like the Suns were going to win in 7 if they had won Game 5. It's hard for me to pick against a Game 7 on their home court. But when Milwaukee won Game 5, you just felt like, they knew the opportunity that was in front of them going back to their home court. Role players, rotation guys generally do better on their home court. And it was a place where they had already won twice. You knew that crowd was going to be crazy. Obviously, it was. I mean, the drone shots of the Milwaukee crowd outside the arena, too, just absolutely astounding. A little concerning with the pandemic. I hope everybody's vaccinated in that Milwaukee crowd, but that's something we can get into a whole little bit later. But I mean, then just to go out, there's one thing we just need to talk about and we'll get into the Bucks and how they got here and all this point, but there's nothing else that we need to talk about here. Giannis Antetokounmpo had 50 points in a Game 6 2 weeks ago. We were talking about him maybe not even being able to play. He wasn't able to close out that Atlanta series. Obviously, the Bucks winning those last 2 games without Giannis. 17 of 19 from the line. I mean, this is an all-time performance. Game rating only ranks behind LeBron's Game 6 in 2016 in terms of best finals game this decade. I mean, Lewis, they're going to play this game when he goes to the Hall of Fame one day. Like, this is an all-time. I don't know that he'll ever top this performance. And that's maybe a ridiculous thing to say, but that's one of the best games I've ever seen.
No, I think you're 100% right there. I think this game was his official coming out party, which is weird to say for a guy who's the 2-time MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. But it just showed you the complete Giannis experience. Because for one, he flatly dominated the game without dominating the ball, so to speak. The whole time he got a lot of baskets at the rim, off of action, and in transition and different opportunities. I remember I looked up in the third quarter and he had like 32 or something. And I was just like, he's got that many points. And I was like, he's going to get 50 points. And I love that he ended up just on 50. He missed just enough free throws, right? Because the guy was Steve Nash at the line in Game 6. He missed just enough free throws just to be able to hit 50 on the head. But here's his stats for the whole series. 35.2 points, 13.2 rebounds, 5 assists, 61% from the field. He's the first player in finals history to ever to hit all those thresholds. So, and also on top of it, they have 5 blocks in Game 6, just to show you, the wreath of his physical prowess. Like he had a shot, he blocked 1 of 8 shot right at the rim in Game 6, like straight volleyball swatted. And you got to think, the guys on the Levertard show are constantly talking about how Ayton looks like that, and he's this physical specimen who dominated largely the Western Conference playoffs, and he couldn't do anything with Giannis. Even when Giannis first came back game one off of a bad knee, he was still pushing Ayton around. So it just goes to show you kind of where Giannis is on like the freak totem pole. He's pretty much at the top. And when it comes, you briefly spoke on it, like Kevin Durant being number one right now, even though I think Kevin Durant has a great take to the throne, I think it's Giannis's to lose. At this moment, what he just did in this finals, he was undoubtedly the most dominant player. This is one of the most dominant individual performances in the finals since maybe LeBron 2016. You got Dwayne Wade 2006, Hakeem Olajuwon when 94, 95. It was an all-time performance for sure. And it's with his accomplishment because he's one of the most decorated guys now, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the resume is insane. I mean, this guy's 26 years old. He's been now an NBA champion with a finals MVP. He's been an all-star 5 times. He's been in the all-NBA 5 times. He was on the all-rookie team his first year. He won most improved player. He won defensive player of the year. Like Giannis Antetokounmpo, and of course 2 MVPs, he could have retired tomorrow. He's a Hall of Famer. Like, I know everybody keeps talking about, or I've seen a couple times this week on Basketball Reference, the Hall of Fame percentage calculator. And I know Giannis isn't at 100% yet, but let's be honest, he's at 100%. 100%. He's getting in the Hall of Fame. He could never play a single minute of organized NBA basketball again, and I think he's got to be there. It's tough. Like you said, with him and with KD and with Steph, that's basically my hovering 3 at one point. I think any of them can be the best player on the floor. I think they can put their imprints on the game in different ways. But he's certainly in that conversation. I mean, like you said, it totally matters. I mean, here's the reality. Jrue Holiday and Chris Middleton weren't even that good in Game 6. I mean, Jrue Holiday was 4 of 19. Excellent defensively, obviously, like he had been the whole series. And of course, that's what he's there for. But he only scored 12 points. Chris Middleton had 17 points, a massive bucket down the end of the game. He was hitting for the entire playoffs. And I think he deserves credit for that. But it just didn't matter. Giannis went into that game and just straight up, it was one of those performances where he said, I'm not losing. It doesn't matter what happens tonight. I am not losing. It's somebody that, for a Phoenix team that was so resilient and it seemed to respond to every punch, Giannis just said, I am the one who does all the punching. It doesn't matter what you guys got. They survived great Devin Booker games, like you said, and he just put his imprint on it. The ceiling game dunk in 5 on the alley-oop, and of course the block on Ayton that everybody is going to talk about. And it's crazy with DeAndre Ayton against Giannis in that I don't even feel like Ayton played that bad. Giannis just was so good that it suffocated him. He was the only big that had any chance, really, that Phoenix could provide in that entire series. And that's a big reason why I think Phoenix ended up losing. Is they didn't have enough depth with the bigs. I think losing Dario Saric went a little bit. Not that I think that may have been the difference, but losing him definitely hurt with the ACL in Game 1. But they just didn't have an answer. They had nothing on earth to stop Giannis. Not that I think it would have mattered the way he's playing, but they couldn't throw anything at him. It just didn't matter.
Yeah, truthfully, I think the Sarge injury was definitely understated as far as how the big of the impact. It messed up their rotation and gave them very limited bigs. They're playing Frank Kaminsky in finals in minutes because they just didn't have any other options, But I also think another injury impacted them as well. Obviously, the Chris Paul, we don't know what's happening with his hand or whatnot. That's something they had to deal with, as well as I think the Cameron Payne injury in the Clippers series. He didn't have the level of gameplay that he was having before that injury, like in the first couple series. He didn't have that level of production since essentially he came back after that. He messed up his leg in the Clippers series. So I think that was something that messed them up as well. But when it comes to injuries, I'm not going to say the Bucks got lucky with comes to injury because they almost didn't even have Giannis. So if Giannis was a normal person, he's not playing right then. But as far as the Suns, for one, in that Game 6, they came out very flat. It was a very sloppy game to start, a ton of turnovers. They had their lowest scoring first quarter in the entire playoffs. They had 16 points in the first quarter. And for a elimination game for the finals on the road, I just thought that they would come out a little bit better than that. Chris Paul actually didn't have a bad game. He had a good game. It wasn't good enough. But obviously, they weren't able to handle an off night from Devin Booker. He didn't make a single 3-point shot. He went 0 for 7 from there, 8 for 22. Basically, Drew Holiday did what he was supposed to. But I'm glad that you brought up the supporting cast not handling it, because for one, this is why I didn't think they were going to win Game 5, because they went on the road, right? And obviously, this was a home and home series before that point, and they got the greatest game from their core three all playoffs. They all went over 27 points, with Giannis having 30 and Middleton having 30. And to turn around and go home, and for both of those guys to have a dud and Giannis to carry him on his back anyway, I halfway wanted Chris Middleton to not get 17 points, because I wanted Bobby Portis to be the second leading scorer, because I thought that would make the story even more grander. Like he did it with Bobby Portis, But at the end of the day, I think that is just the Suns. They just didn't. This was a case of the best player on the floor playing for the other team, and them not really having an answer for it. I don't really think there was too much they could have used against Milwaukee to change what the situation was. One, obviously they could have not turned the ball over. The turning the ball over, that was like one of the biggest. They gave them so many extra possessions and their 4 wins. It wasn't funny, as well as offensive rebounds. So extra possessions via turnovers and offensive rebounds, their size, it ended up showing. And I think that's what pretty much generally helped those guys come out on top, because the margin for victory, besides that one game where I think they blew them out in like Game 3 or Game 4 or whatever it was, it's a pretty close series after for the past 3 games of it. So and also Blake Griffin, real quick. I want to give Blake Griffin some credit, because he actually probably did the best job on Giannis, right? In the entire
weirdly, shockingly, playoff Blake Griffin. Look, he kept it on ice the whole time, and they were ready to go. That's what's crazy. Like, Kevin Durant's toe almost knocked them out of the playoffs. Like, they were really close to out of the playoffs. Really? Like, Budenholzer would have been fired. There would have been so many things that would have changed. But here's the thing. None of that matters. And a lot of it got solidified. I mean, that's the thing here is, the massive trade for Drew Holiday gets solidified no matter what happens now, because he won a title and because he was great defensively, played his role. I mean, them putting him on Devin Booker, people talk about Coach Bud not adjusting. When they start putting Drew Holiday on Devin Booker, that's, to me, in the grand scheme of things, is when the series changed a little bit. I know Booker was good in a couple of those games, but he was really bad from behind the arc the whole series. And I think it felt like that changed the momentum on that front. For Chris Middleton, this is a guy who's been pretty roundly. Is he good enough to be, Giannis's Robin, essentially, to his Batman? Is he the guy? Here he is, as they both grew up together on this Bucks team. They've been here 8 years now. They're both solidified now. And for, a lot of good vets that you can be happy for on this team. Obviously, Bobby Portis, like you mentioned, just a great story, how his career went, how he's, being able to come back. He's a folk hero now, forever in the city of Milwaukee. Guys like PJ Tucker, Brooke Lopez, who have been in this league for a long time, have been on a lot of really solid teams. Good for them getting their first ring. That's the stuff you love to see. Obviously, for Milwaukee, too, as a city, their first title since the 1970s. I said on last episode, I loved seeing Kareem and Oscar Robertson back in the building, all that coming full circle. The parade was crazy. It looked like the only thing with the parade that blew my mind, I don't know if you saw any clips from the parade. Did it seem like their bus was flying through the crowd? Like, was that a COVID thing or what? Enjoy it. Slow down. Enjoy it. Soak it all in.
You have to soak it in. Like, he's obviously never been there before. That bus driver has never been in any parade ever.
Like, it was just, they looked like they were flying around curves. It's like, there's so many people out there, a rowdy crowd, no doubt about that. Obviously, hats off to the Phoenix crowd as well. They were super rowdy in all those games. They definitely showed out for this team. Obviously, not the ending that they wanted. They're still in search of their first title in franchise history. Certainly not the ending Chris Paul wanted. I think that's, like, for the Phoenix young core, for guys like Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker, obviously, it's easy for them. Like, this stinks now, and nothing is given in this league. I always say that, when you look back at the KD and Russ and James Harden picture at the end of that series lost to Miami, like, a lot changes very quickly in the NBA. But all these guys are going to have long careers. I think we're not expecting anything to change there. Chris Paul's going to run it back in Phoenix. He's indicated that today. He wants to stay. Obviously, management wants him back. I think that's a no-brainer. He's got one more deal on his contract. In the Western Conference, it's really hard to run it back. Like, we saw Miami this year with fatigue when they lost the finals. Most teams that win the final, like, the only exception to the rule I can think that wasn't a LeBron team was the Spurs back when they lost to LeBron in 2013 in that Miami Heat team. Obviously came back and won the title next year. But it's really, really hard with a lot of these teams. Again, we haven't even talked about teams that are going to get better. But, just off rip, with it being in the Western Conference, I can think of 4 or 5 teams that are going to be lingering around right there next season, especially as guys start to get healthy.
I think that for one, as far as like who benefited the most from the freak injuries in the postseason, you got to look at Phoenix, because every team that they faced had a key injury, whether it be the Lakers with Anthony Davis. Second round, they saw the Nuggets without Jamal Murray. Third round, Kawhi Leonard goes down in the middle of the series. And then in the actual finals, well, Giannis played, but he came in hobbled, which essentially aided them in their first 2 victories, him getting back up to speed. And when they try to run it back, I think all of those teams that they beat, you gotta look at the Lakers, the Clippers, the Jazz, the Nuggets. If they come back fully healthy and at full strength, I think that any of those teams could beat Phoenix going forward. I feel like it's not going to be easy for them to get back. Obviously, Chris Paul had an amazing, to be honest, Chris Paul had a good game and he had a good finals. I'm looking at his averages right now. Yeah, he averaged 21.8 points, 8.2 assists, 55 from the field, and 52% from 3. So he had a dynamite point guard finals experience, but he's only getting older, and we do know that. Like you hinted, he has one he's a player option for like $44 million or something like that. And I know that they're probably going to want to extend him to get him, a couple more years if they can stay in Phoenix. But you don't know if this is the longest Chris Paul's he stayed quote unquote healthy in the postseason. He's had a long history of injuries and his body breaking down on him. This is his longest postseason. Who knows if he'll be able to bounce back like that going forward? So I feel for him as far as I don't know when his next opportunity is going to be. The young guys, though, everyone has a bit of heartbreak before they win the finals, right? Except for obviously the last year the Lakers won it in their first year, but all the parties involved had their own heartbreak, whether it be the Lakers before AD got there and AD's whole existence in New Orleans. But for this to be their first experience, I think it's the highs and the lows. You know what I mean? It sucks because for one, you never think you can get back there again. You never exactly know. But the confidence that this can instill in them, to be like, we're young and we can do this, I think that's going to be something that's going to permeate within that culture that they're building. And now they have an understanding of what it takes. So I think Phoenix, if they can continue to do, I feel like as long as Chris Paul's playing this level, they'll be a player in as far as contending. But going forward, and Devin Booker and Ayton being the true 2 for those teams, I think that this finals run is going to do a lot for their confidence as well as Monty's confidence in them and the team.
Well, they've had a lot of big moments, even going back to the bubble last year where they had to win all 9 of those games just to even be in contention. Now, having been in the finals, like you said, all that playoff experience is going to pay off. It'll benefit for them in the long run. For Chris Paul, like you said, nothing is given. I mean, he's 36 years old. Like, he and LeBron are the exceptions to the rule at this point. Mm-hmm. I think Chris Paul is going to play as long as he can, obviously still playing on an extremely high level. So you hope that he can get back, but it's really difficult to get back. A lot changes. Phoenix, the most important thing this year with Phoenix is, I know it's not the way that they wanted to end it, but I mean, this year added legitimacy. It's a franchise that has been pretty much a mess since Steve Nash left. Like, they've had 1 year where they won 48 games, but largely other than that, there hasn't been an identity. They haven't had that culture. I think now when you see that young core, there are ways to get guys to go in there and buy into what they have there. And, James Jones did do a good job of filling out that roster with them being a new GM. And obviously Monty is a guy who has a lot of respect around the league. So, again, it's not the perfect storybook ending that I think Phoenix fans would hope for, but, there's hope in Phoenix. Like, there's reasons to be happy about this franchise going forward. It's tough to get back, but, we'll see what happens. Either way, it's a season to celebrate. All right, who's balling, who's falling? Our NBA version of the stock market. We always like to start with the good before the bad. Of course, Lewis is the guest on the show. It's his first ever Who's Balling, Who's Falling. So let's get right into it. Who's balling, Lewis?
Oh man, I gotta go with Trae Young. Trae Young's balling. He played in the Skins League in Oklahoma, and Yeah, there was this guy who was heckling him, I'm guessing the whole game. And like he's not like Trae Young didn't have the postseason of dreams, the villain of the NBA. So in that same fashion, he's asking what league does this guy play in, and then immediately goes in for an inbounds play, shakes him off, cross him up, pump fake, buzzer beater three, wave by like Damian Lillard. So that's my who's balling for the week.
I'm still a little raw just from all the like trash talking on Trae Young that just didn't work, and then he give it back to you. Like that's part of Trae's appeal. Like obviously, my Sixers dealt with a whole lot of more of that than I would have expected. But that's just one of those things. Like, why would you trash talk Trae Young? Like some guys just feed off that. Like there's certain guys who you just don't trash talk. Like Embiid was that way, Kobe was that way, MJ was that way back in the day, where it's just like they thrive off being the villain. Trae Young is a villain.
I think it's the size, Kev. I think it's because you look and he's like 5'10" and a half.
Yeah.
And like he just doesn't have the build of a threatening, menacing NBA player. So if you're 6'1", 6'2" regular guy, you think, I could take him. You can't.
And I think, and that's why he's a soul snatcher too, the way I think Steph Curry is, where the sense is like, because you see these guys and they look more like regular human beings, and guys you might run into at the Y, and then they just ruin your life. Like they just go completely supernova and just ruin any remote existence you had, complete world destroyers, and they get in the zone. When they get going, we know they're going to pull up from anywhere. All right, balling for me this week, I got President Obama. He's joining the NBA Africa as a strategic partner. They just announced this today. He's going to have, a financial investment in this as well. But, we talk about the game going global, just the latest initiative to do that. Obviously, the continent of Africa produced one of my current favorite basketball players, Joel Embiid, coming right out of Cameroon. Pascal Siakam as well, obviously another big one to come out recently. So, just more of the global game expanding. President Obama been a hoops fan for a while. I remember that story recently that came out when he was in the White House about how he had like a secret all-star game that no one knew about, where like D Wade and LeBron, a couple other people pulled up. But obviously this is something that's growing, a relatively new initiative here by the NBA and getting a big voice of legitimacy. All right, who we got falling for you this week?
For my fallen, it kind of hurts my heart to do this because he's my guy, but I got to go with Kyle Kuzma. For one, if you've been following the rumor mill, his name has been getting thrown around the entire NBA by Rob Pelinka to anybody who'll catch it. He even caught trade rumors on his birthday. So it's the long relationship of LA and Kyle Kuzma seems to be heading towards an end. So it's Kyle Kuzma, my fallen for the week.
It does seem like it. It really does feel like Rob Pelinka has picked up the phone and trying to move Kuzma and KCP for literally anything at this point. Obviously, no matter what happens, I mean, Kuz did win a title in LA. I'm going to stick with the Lakers, actually, for my fallen as well. My fallen this week is Montrezl Harrell's Lakers future, because apparently Montrez is 50-50 on signing the player option, and the reports right now are out there saying that he's going to get traded if he signs the option. So it seems no matter what, whether he chooses to leave voluntarily or whether he gets traded once he picks up that option, that Montrezl Harrell will not be a Los Angeles Laker next season.
Oh yeah, I'm sick of him. By the way, first off, I'm sick. All the voices that are coming out of Lakers locker room right now are not making me happy. We got Dennis Schroeder, who's demanding hundreds of millions of dollars. We've got Kyle Kuzma, who thinks he's as good as Jason Tatum, and he's getting held back. Montrezl Harrell, he's fighting the minutes, and the coach, he's giving him unfair, DNPs. And we got Andre Drummond, who's selling Kareem Abdul-Drummond merch, inciting that he just didn't get a chance. When he was traded, we immediately pushed him into the starting lineup without a LeBron James, barely an Anthony Davis to be able to take forward of this team, and he did nothing. So I hate everything that's coming out from these guys. Like, the only guys who are important, who matter on the Lakers are LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and everyone's in the reworking now. Everyone has an opportunity to get going. So this, I think it's 100% factual when they say that if Montrezl Harrell signs the player option, he's going, because he's going to be filler. We got some names I know we want to go after, and the hard part, and this is where Rob's going to make his money, is we got to work all of this out, because it's our cap situation isn't the greatest right now.
Yeah, no, the cap is definitely not great. The war chest isn't necessarily the greatest either. Like all these guys have value. It's just what it doesn't feel like they have enough to go in on anything big. Like if Dame actually becomes available, or if Bradley Beal really is out of Washington for good. Like these are guys that'll get back players or get back picks, but obviously you're not exactly looking for draft capital right now either. When you've got LeBron James and Anthony Davis, you're permanently in win now mode. They're going to be look, it's the Lakers. They're always going to be in the market for stars. But like you said, Rob Pelinka is definitely going to be earning his money here over the next few weeks. All right, so we're 2 days away from the NBA draft. Like we said, the finals end, and we are right back into draft season. Already a trade before we even get into the picks and kind of what to expect with that happening this week. The Grizzlies finalized a trade with the Pelicans. The Grizzlies are sending Jonas Valanciunas and number 17 this year and number 51 this year to the Pelicans for Steven Adams, Eric Bledsoe, the number 10 overall, and the number 40, as well as protected 2022 first-round pick. That actually belongs to the Lakers as well, of course, as part of that Anthony Davis deal. I think the first reaction from a lot of people was, wow, that's random, especially because, a guy like Jonas Valanciunas was really pretty beloved in Memphis, did really well for them last year. I'm starting to make a little more sense of it now. I mean, the Pelicans are clearing cap. There's no way around it, trying to get off the Adams contract, the Bledsoe contract, more importantly as well. They desperately, we talked about how they need to nail the coaching hire as well. They desperately need to get somebody around there with Zion. They already know they're kind of on the clock there. So the Pelicans are trying to make that push, it seems like, that Atlanta did with Trae Young, where it's like, hey, we know we have this great young talent. We need to get them into the playoffs. Like they need to get that experience, get some of that seasoning that we talked about with Phoenix. Obviously, we saw how well that worked for Atlanta with Trae this year. The Pelicans looking to, they had expectations, I think, last year for the first time. But, between Zion, between Brandon Ingram, it's time to get these boys some meaningful minutes. And they're opening up the space to do that. So we'll see what happens there. I'm a little more surprised with the Grizzlies. But, I mean, in the short term, Eric Bledsoe makes them a better squad. And you get the draft pick as well. So that's kind of one of those things where, I get them trying to move up as well. The Grizzlies, it still feels like, are in rebuild mode. So the fact that they're able to move from 17 to 10, like you have the potential there to add a young guy around that core with John Morant and Jaren Jackson and Dylan Brooks.
Yeah, now I think that for one, real quick, I thought David Griffin almost made my falling because for one, he's just undoing his mistakes essentially of last offseason. The team was terrible. It didn't work and it didn't fit. There was no spacing. Steven Adams can't play with Zion, and neither can you feel that team with Eric Bledsoe and Lonzo Ball as the starters, So I think what he did then, he's kind of hustling backwards because now he's kind of getting back to that point. I do like Valanciunas for them. I think Valanciunas is a better fit. He can help stretch the floor a little bit more and make it breathable for those guys there. But there's a clock to be ticking for David Griffin and New Orleans Pelicans because I just feel that they have to get this right. They have to build a team that can contend. They need to it's play in or bust essentially. Or I think there's going to be some big changes, including maybe even Brandon Ingram being used and leveraged to get some more talent around Zion to change things up.
Yeah, I mean, Zion, I would say, is the only one who's completely safe at this point. Like, that's the one guy who completely is untouchable. Everything else, down to coaching, GM, like you said, David Griffin obviously will always have a ton of goodwill when he first takes the job. He won the title in Cleveland, but he's on the clock as well. Like they said, the most important thing to me was nailing that coaching hire. Zion's had 3 coaches in 3 years, but they got it. They do. I think it is a play in or bust for them as well. Again, I don't want to see – I'm not one of these people who wants to run superstars out of their teams necessarily, but it is a situation where it's like, I do want to see the kid thrive as well. He's too good not to. Hopefully this is the start of them moving in the right direction, but I think they're going to be going in with that no matter what.
And really quickly about the Grizzlies before we move on, I think what they're doing is because there's rumors that Eric Bledsoe might not even be there. So I'm guessing they're trying to shore up a bit of, get some money off the, help those guys get some money off the books in exchange for picks with Steven Adams. But they're obviously really good at drafting and developing young talent. So I think that they're betting on themselves with that trade that they'll be able to get someone good at 10 and make that worthwhile and to continue to build onto their young core. Because right now, even with the team that they have already, they're obviously contenders for a playoff seed and in Ja and Dylan Brooks and what's my guy's name? JJ.
Oh, Jaren Jackson.
Jaren Jackson's growing right before our eyes.
Yeah, I mean, they like you said, they've been nailing draft picks, and really last year was the step that you want them to take. They made the play-in game, but didn't get in the bubble. They won the play-in game this year, able to get in the playoffs. So yeah, but
Hmm.
that's what's crazy. That's what's nice about Memphis is they are playing more with house money right now. They are still technically in rebuilding mode. They've got young guys, but it's not like anybody's expecting them to win the title next season. You add a really good player again at 10. All of a sudden, the core for this team and the ceiling for this team can get a whole lot higher. We know plenty of this is a loaded draft. There's going to be plenty of talented players around 10. That's really the theme. I mean, we're 2 nights away from the draft. It's a really loaded one across the board. I think there's plenty
Yeah.
of talent in the first round. I mean, just looking at the top three, it does feel like to me the top three is set in place at this point. I think everything around Detroit and Cade Cunningham and them not taking him as a smokescreen. I'm not gonna lie, that SGA and that 6 pick is. I'm picking up the phone if I'm Detroit, and I'm taking a real long look at that just because of how good SGA I think is, even with the injury risk, and they get a high pick like that. But I also don't think that's real. Like, I think that's Detroit saying, you need to come at us with this type of offer before we're even
Hmm.
picking up the phone to move number one. Any of that other Houston talk and everybody else that it feels like has been floating around for the last week, it's just non-existent. Like, Ken Cunningham's already at Detroit Tigers games. Like, the guy is going number one. I don't really know why we're trying to talk ourselves out of it. It would legitimately be stunning if Detroit trade out of number one. I love Troy Weaver, their GM's quote, by the way, the other day. I don't know if you saw this. He said this today, but they're asking him, like, oh, you worried about drafting for fit or anything like that? And he just responded, we won 20 games last year. We're drafting everybody, which really, I enjoyed that quote. I like when GMs are self-aware of their situation.
That's funny. That quote, and some of the chatter I see around on NBA Twitter and things like that. They're like, "Oh man, like we're unsure if they get Cade, because Cade, Grant's still there. He's still going to be the number one option." I'm like, guys, like,
we're just bored. Like, everyone's just bored, which is crazy. We're 2 weeks out from the finals. Like, it's a little more compacted of an off season. They're going to be season starts. They announced today on October 19th, so it'll be a little more normal this year. But it's like we don't have the time to be bored right now. We're moving. Cade is going one. It seems like by all intentions that Jalen Green is going to go number
that's
two to
my
Houston,
guy.
and it seems like that Evan Mobley, excuse me, is going to go number 3 to Cleveland. I really like. I mean, I'll let you talk about Jalen Green. I'm going to talk about him real quick though. With Cleveland, they need a big man. It's perfect. Like, to me, he goes in there. You have Jared Allen, who played really well for them last year, and I thought was a great pickup when they were doing those Brooklyn trades. You got those two. You got Colin Sexton. You got Darius Garland, and you got Isaac Okoro. That's a pretty good young core. Like, they had moments last year where that Cleveland young core was winning a couple of games. I know they really tailed off in the second half of the season, but if they draft him, they're almost one of those sneaky, surprising teams. So I think it kind of makes some noise in the Eastern Conference next year.
Yeah, no, I also think that that's pretty much the top three as far as like what everyone's saying. I'm unsure though, real quick, about just the number 3 pick, if they're gonna stay put, because obviously you do have Jared Allen, and maybe I'm unsure what his contract situation is, but I know that he's gonna be up for a new deal or looking for a new deal fairly soon, and they have the opportunity to trade out. They do have a couple guards, depending on it. They're going to be. They have the potential to be sellers when the draft starts, and I think they'll be selling up until their pick is pretty much in. So we'll see what happens there. As far as Jalen Green, every play, like all the clips from him in the G League tournament, they just jump off the screen to me. And the kid is a mega athletic, 6'6" wing who just, who can score pretty much all 3 levels, and the confidence. Like, I love the confidence. He's like, I'm only working out for the first 2 teams because I feel like I'm one of the best 2 players in the league. And he's like, I want to be rookie of the year, and I want to make all NBA defensive team in my first year. Like, I love a guy who has that kind of confidence. Obviously, it can backfire him horribly, but it's the way he plays his game, and the way that he he conducts himself off the court. Like, I think he has the makings of to be like, an Anthony Edwards type for this draft class. But as you go forward, we got our hometown Magic here. They got pick 5 and pick 8. And there's a couple different things that they can do. I know a lot of folks, they got, we got them looking at Jonathan Kuminga. I think I don't. Davion Mitchell may be around there. A lot of people, I saw another article that Boo Knight as well as Corey Kispert. Give those guys a scorer, a bona fide scorer in Boo Knight, and then a knockdown shooter in Kispert. But I think that the Magic. I just saw Weltman. He addressed the media and said that, hey, we're going to get two good young players. I think that they may be buyers. I think that I don't know if you've seen the trade opportunity for them to potentially trade with Cleveland. That give either the 5 and the 8 or either or, and then take on salary with Kevin Love and then trade Gary Harris. And I think that there's an opportunity for the Magic because I know that the Magic fan base was bummed by the fact that they didn't get a top 3 pick.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Not to with 4. I think if they were up at 4 and had Jalen Suggs, I feel like it would be able to talk Magic fans a lot more into it. A couple people asked me if they thought that Kuminga could maybe jump up the board because he seems like he's one of these late risers, and then if there's a chance, I feel like Toronto would be the only team that would take him. But I don't really see. I think Jalen Suggs is going 4 to Toronto. I don't think there's any way he slips. If he does, I think Orlando should take him at 5 without a doubt. I don't think that's going to happen. I agree with you in the sense that I do think Orlando having those 2 top 10 picks are probably, if they want to move up to 3, if they want to move up, because Mobley would make sense for them being, they need a big man. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, Luke's gone in the offseason. Bamba has not been that guy so far. They have plenty of guards. They're not necessarily in desperate need of that right now. Forward and center is probably the biggest. Depending, even with Jonathan Isaac in the mix, assuming health anyway, they still need way more depth at that position. So I think the Magic are still kind of drafting for everything, but, forward and center is what they're going with. If they have a guy in particular, like you said, if Cleveland is serious out of moving out of 3, I just don't see it. Like, I think their fit makes too much sense. I think that's kind of a lot of smoke too. And I think for the Magic, you're definitely bummed because, like you said, I think for Magic, because they've always been short. Like, it goes back to Trae Young, and that's the one thing where still everybody, in 2018, with them being 1 pick away from Trae Young, 1 pick away from Luka, who knows how that would have played out, given that situation, if it had been different, instead getting Mo Bamba. I think there are a lot of people who feel like, they're 1 pick away this time around. I guess we're going to just wait and see what happens. But like you said, you nail 5, you nail this, you nail 9, it totally changes the entire outlook. Like, the Magic have plenty of talented young players on that roster, assuming health. It's just they need that one guy. Like, that's the one thing they're missing. That's obviously why a lot of Magic fans are trying to sell themselves on Cade Cunningham and ideally trying to get that number 1 pick. It does feel like they're missing that superstar talent, but they also have the opportunity to draft him. Like, that's the thing, is like, we've seen, this is a deep draft. We have seen how this goes. It's not just linear anymore. Obviously, you want the number 1 pick, but nothing is guaranteed, especially in a draft this big. So who else on the board stands out for you? Anybody in particular you really like a lot?
It sucks. As far as like, I still got to do a lot of my mock draft coverage, but I want to talk about my boy who decided, and I want to say this is the new rule this year. I want to say, my boy Johnny Juzang from UCLA. I was looking at him for like a late steal for the for the Lakers, but he had a terrible combine, and he never really he didn't yet until then to basically put in his intentions to go to the draft, and he decided not to when he pulled back and went to UCLA. He had an amazing Final Four and whole tournament run. So I was, he seemed like a guy who could get plugged into a Lakers rotation in the regular season, and we can see where he fits in for a guy who can possibly get his own shot and who's a sniper that fit into what we needed. But seeing that he did not have he did not have a good showing in the combine, it broke my heart. So he was somebody who I was looking at as a hopeful steal. But there's also a guy, I forget his name. His name's Bones. I saw him in the combine, and maybe his name's Bones Highland. I'll correct myself on that later. But he stood out as a defender and a guy who can be a really good rotational player pretty much from the start.
Yeah, Bones Highland from VCU.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm right there. Like, it's tough with Juzang, like you said, because, and I feel like he might be okay just because of, like you said, the Final Four performance, making the run that they did. But of course, like you said, the combine definitely not going the way that he wanted to. It is interesting. Like, I I guess I just don't expect that much drama in this draft necessarily. It still feels like it's going to be chalky. I don't think we're going to see the big moves necessarily. Like, I think we'll see teams jockey maybe a little bit and trade. But I think anyone, for example, like if you're going into this draft thinking that maybe like Dame Lillard or Ben Simmons or Bradley Beal or all these guys that have these major names that come on the trade market get moves, I just don't see it. Because a lot of these contenders, too, that would maybe be making moves, it's not really necessarily draft moves. Like, how many of these teams that are drastically going to be looking to change their identities in this offseason, whether it's Philly potentially, whether it's Portland, whether it's even a Utah or somebody like that, they're not really going to be going for picks. Nobody's really angling to be the blow it up type situation. I think the only one maybe is Toronto. Maybe you watch Toronto and see what they do. But even with them, like most of their young guys, I mean, with OG and with Freddie VanVleet, like, it's not exactly like they're old at this point. Like Pascal Siakam is still really young. We'll see what. I mean, the Warriors are the only one. I mean, the Warriors, it feels like, are shopping 7-14 to everybody who will listen.
Maybe even Philly.
Yeah, I mean, it's just tough with me with the Warriors because, again, I don't think they have anything that benefits the Sixers right now. Like, you got to go all in with Joel Embiid, unless the Warriors are going to trade Steph Curry, which there's a better chance of that meteor crashing into the planet that's supposed to be hovering overhead. They don't have anything. Like, I wouldn't move for Wiggins, James Wiseman. They don't need when they have Embiid. Like, if I was taking a young prospect, like 7-14 in Wiseman is a lot more attractive to me if I'm like a Washington, for example.
Yeah.
Because at that point, if you're going total rebuild, I get that. That's not a bad haul. I don't think that's what I'd move Bradley Beal for, but that at least gets me on the phone with them. But that's where it's tough, is I think a lot of these guys are going to be going for more, or a lot of these teams, I should say, are going to be going for more win now moves necessarily. And so, the teams that are rebuilding are in the draft right now. Like, we're going to see what they do. I just don't expect to see any big shakeups there. Like we mentioned, Cleveland is maybe the one that trades out at 3, but even with that, I don't see happening. I will just say, though, before we close out, it's like a 0% chance for me. That Detroit thing, it's been hilarious watching NBA Twitter try to talk themselves into trading that, into thinking that Detroit is going to trade that number 1 pick, especially after they went as crazy as they did. I mean, all those celebrations. I remember that video of Jalen Rose in the press box. Like, Detroit fans are happy. They got something here. So, I don't mess it up. Don't overthink it.
Did you see when they were asking, why can it's escaping me right now, with the head coach for the Pistons, who was the former head coach for the Toronto Raptors.
Oh, Dwayne Casey.
When they asked Dwayne Casey, basically, like, a question he was asking all the recruits, like, I asked them, do they make their bed in the morning? And that shows me what kind of guy they are. I'm like, all right, that is some of the most old school thinking. Imagine you pass on Cade Cunningham and he becomes the star that everyone thinks he's going to be. And they go, why didn't you get drafted by Detroit? And he's like, well, I told him that, sometimes I leave my bed messy.
Yeah, I don't have a great 6-inch fold here. Like, I didn't realize Cade was going to Paris Island. He's going to Detroit. Come on, what are we doing? Just don't pass on Cade Cunningham. Cade would have won number 1 last year.
And then that's the thing too, as well, is like, thinking about the shade of the 6 for the number 1 pick. Don't get me wrong, I love SJ. I think he's a good player, but he's not a franchise-altering player, right? No. And then if you're getting him, you're playing more of the long game. And that's not to say if they get Cade or if they even get Jalen Green that they'll be amazing off the bat. But that's someone you could rebrand your whole franchise around. If you have the number 1 pick, I'm almost always in favor of keeping it, unless you're like in a situation where you are already a contender. So I think that it would be foolish to do anything other than go for Cade and do what the people want. Because this is also like, we talk about so many of these franchise decisions coming down to, what's good for the business of the team and the marketing of the team. It'll be easier to sell jerseys and season tickets with the number 1 overall pick versus giving that to someone else.
I mean, Detroit's largely been just kind of floating in mediocrity for the most part. I mean, they made the 8 seed, I think, once or twice maybe in the past decade, but ever since that dominant team in the Eastern Conference in the 2000s with Rip and Tayshaun Prince and Sheed and Chauncey Billups and all those guys, they haven't really done much of anything. Like, this is what you've been looking for, right? They went all in for Blake Griffin, who was good for them for a couple of years, but you knew that was the kind of trade that was just going to kind of get them stuck in cap hell. Yeah, this is I love SGA. Like, I could not be higher on SGA. Like, I think the kid has a lot of potential. I don't think he has that number one guy potential, like you said, though. I think he's a really good player that you want, but not at the cost of trading your number one overall pick. Though it is intriguing. I at least listen to it if I'm Detroit. But still, I'm hanging up the phone. Sometimes you don't need to overthink it. You got to keep it simple. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate Lewis Axen as well joining me. Follow Lewis on Twitter at Lewis Artisan. Check out the LA Minute podcast. Lewis, you got anything to plug these days besides the pod? Like, what else we got here on our last minute here?
Oh man, no, the pod's coming back. You know, I had to go through a move over the summer, so my home studio's been down. But the plan is to get it cracking again for football season. Now we're ready to go for all 4 major sports in a couple months.
All right, there we go. We'll make sure you subscribe to that podcast. In the meantime, Lewis is on iTunes. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Spreaker, PlayIn, TuneIn, anywhere you can find podcasts. You can find Lewis's LA Minute podcast. You can find us, of course, the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Justin will be back next week. I'm Kevin Rayfuse. Watch the podcast on YouTube. Enjoy the draft, and we'll be back at the breakdown next week. All right, sweet. Let me stop recording real quick. Yep.